If you ever hear me cringe or see me cringe when somebody says the simplest answer is often the best one, it's because people don't understand what Occam's razor really is. So it seems like we got to talk about it. Yeah, let's make it make sense.
Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is always the best.
And you think one is simpler than two.
Pretty sure it is, yeah.
Baby shows up. Chase tells you that two people exchanged fluids to create this being. I tell you that one stork dropped the little tyke off in a diaper. You're gonna go with the two or the one?
I think your argument is specious.
I think your tie is ugly.
First and foremost, let's get the name out of the way. William of Ockham, the 14th century philosopher. William of Ockham had this razor, and in philosophy, a razor is like a metaphor. It's a tool for cutting away dookie, bad ideas, bad arguments, bad whatever. It just cuts that stuff away. Anything that doesn't belong in the reasoning, a razor will slice it away. If it's not supposed to be there and the razor is doing its work, it'll get rid of it. Now, what the principle of Occam's razor is, when you have multiple explanations for something, the one that requires the fewest assumptions or multiplies assumptions the least, you should prefer that one. That's it. That's all. So before we go further, just a couple of notes on what I just didn't say. I didn't say that that's the correct one, that this is a verdict. This is just a guide as a tiebreaker. So if you have two explanations that for everything else they're equally matched, you would use Occam's razor to nudge one ahead a little bit. Also, I said fewest assumptions, not the fewest words or the fewest causes. Just means the fewest moving parts that have no support. So this tells you which assumption you should have as the starting point. It doesn't tell you which assumption is actually true. Now, saying the simplest explanation is always correct is where most people go wrong. Simplicity can be preferential in certain conditions, in certain types of arguments, but it doesn't guarantee truth. Reality doesn't owe you that. It doesn't owe you simplicity. Sometimes the complicated explanation is the right one. Sometimes two things did go wrong at the same time. Sometimes the universe is just difficult. So Occam's razor doesn't say that things need to not be complex. Matter of fact, bringing in Occam's razor to dismiss a complex and detailed explanation is actually kind of wrong. It's the opposite of what you should be doing. The question shouldn't be which explanation has the fewest parts. It should be which explanation has me taking the fewest leaps of faith. That's a better way to say it. So this isn't a substitute for evidence. It's just a rule of thumb. And that's all a razor is. It's a rule of thumb for navigating things when you're not certain, or when the evidence isn't enough to answer the question. When evidence does hop in and settles the question, that razor steps to the side, goes back on the bench. Evidence, I think, is better than preference, right? Every single time. Also, don't fall for the number trap with Occam's razor. One cause is not simpler than two causes, right? Simplicity is about something we call explanatory power. And Occam's razor, with regard to simplicity, is taking the explanatory power and comparing it to the assumptions. So it's not a head count of all the different moving parts and gears and widgets and whatnot. One really improbable explanation can have tons of assumptions in it compared to two really basic ones happening at the same time. So typically Occam's razor is the tool that you would use when the evidence has done all it can do and you still have you haven't whittled it down to the most likely thing. Occam's razor is best when you're using it correctly. And using it correctly means only using it when the evidence has done everything that it can, like we said, and you haven't figured out what the most likely explanation for something is. And so you should probably do something like this. First, get some evidence. Do some investigation. Cool. So you did that first because Occam's razor, and really any razor, should not replace evidence. It should come after. Check that your explanations that you have, that you're putting forward, account for all this evidence that you have. Not most of it. Try to get all of it. Any explanation that you have that requires you to ignore something inconvenient, that's not a simpler one. It's just that's one that's not complete. And then finally, let's ask which remaining explanation of all of them requires the fewest assumptions that I don't have support for. And then recognize that that's your starting point, not your conclusion. That's where you start at. So the key word I want you to think about in this process is the word equal or equally. You can have two explanations and they need to be doing the same amount of work with the evidence before that razor becomes relevant. If one explanation accounts for more evidence, then we don't need to invoke Occam's razor. That one explanation is better, period. Occam's razor is only for when you're unsure and you have two equally viable options. Commonly, what you see is that somebody sees a bunch of evidence and they get presented with this complicated explanation for the evidence that accounts for all the evidence and it's accurate. And they come up with something simpler and then they say, ha, Occam's razor, I win. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter which one is simpler, just in a vacuum. If the evidence requires that something be complex, then the simple answer is the complex one. The other thing is you want to use the razor selectively. Don't just use it against the explanations that you already don't like and then ignore it when your favorite thing gets filled with assumptions. That's what we would call motivated reasoning. It's not actual reasoning. When you use it correctly, Occam's razor is useful. It keeps you from chasing ghosts when the door is just left open. It keeps you from following assumptions that lead to nowhere and going on wild goose chases. But used incorrectly, it just makes you kind of feel smart when the answer is literally right in front of your face. I hope I made that make sense. If you like this, go ahead and subscribe. We are on a subscriber run, and we have a goal at endofaspecies.com. So follow along with our milestones. Share this with one of your friends, hit the like button, and as always, I'll see you next time.